The neighborhood was still waking. Sprinklers hissing in rhythmic arcs across emerald lawns and the faint thud of a basketball echoing down the cul-de-sac when Marcus Johnson pressed a remote clipped by his front door and watched his garage door lift. The sunlight sliding across the gleaming hood of the silver sedan he had brought home just last night. The first brand-new car he had ever owned after years of overtime shifts at the shop and endless sacrifices. The car his late wife used to nudge him to buy every time he patched up another rusted junker, her voice still lingering in his ear. Get yourself something new, Marcus. You deserve it. And as he stood in the driveway, wiping invisible dust on the hood with a microfiber cloth, his teenage daughter Alicia leaned against the frame with her phone dangling in her hand, teasing, "You gonna name her?" And laughing when he muttered something about not naming cars, even though they both knew he always did. But before he could answer properly, the calm morning cracked open with the sharp sound of Karen Whitfield's shoes smacking the pavement, the self-appointed queen of the HOA stomping across the street in a blazing orange sweater and pearls. Clipboard clutched to her chest. Finger already pointed like a weapon as she shouted, "You stole my car!" Loud enough to rattle the blind of half the houses on the block. Marcus froze, blinking at her with the disbelief of a man who had seen plenty of nonsense, but not yet this brand, then said evenly, "Good morning to you, too," though Alicia couldn't stop herself from blurting out, "Got any proof?" And that was all Karen needed to explode into a tirade about how she had been at the dealership yesterday, how this exact model with, for doors, silver paint leather seats had been promised to her, how Marcus must have broken into his own garage with some kind of universal opener to hide her car, and before Marcus could get another word in, she was already on her phone shrieking to 911 that she was watching a theft in progress. Within minutes, 2 patrol cruisers slid to a stop at the curb, engines humming, and Officers Briggs and Lewis stepped out. Briggs older, thick mustache, radiating the assumption that whoever shouted loudest must be right. Lewis younger and quieter, eyes flicking between Marcus, Karen, and the gleaming temp tag on the back of the car. But Karen cut off even that glance by shoving a pink financing pre-approval slip toward them, insisting it was her title, while Marcus calmly set his keys on a workbench and said, "Officers, this is my house, my car I have. The registration inside if you'll let me get it." Only for Briggs to bark. No sudden movements, and order him to step back as neighbors began to gather, whispering behind curtains and hedges, while Alicia, steady now, lifted her phone and announced, "Live stream is on, her lens capturing everything." Karen screaming, Briggs squaring up, Lewis hesitating, the watering-kin neighbor craning his neck, and Marcus standing tall but silent, breathing the way his wife once taught him. 5 counts to keep from breaking, knowing that in this moment his dignity was all he had, and that proof, cold and solid, was sitting on his kitchen counter, waiting for the courage of one officer to look past the noise and see the truth. Alicia, refusing to back down, filmed steadily, her voice cutting through Karen's hysteria with sharp questions. "Where's the VIN on your paper? Where's your name on the registration? Where's the proof?" While Briggs glared at Marcus and muttered about temporary impound, if ownership could not be verified, Karen shrieked even louder, accusing Marcus of printing fake tags and fooling the bank. Marcus explained that the dealership had delivered the car late last night, that the bill of sale and registration sat in a white envelope on his kitchen counter, and that Alicia could fetch them under supervision. Briggs shook his head, distrust thick, and that's his car. "She's lying." Until even the neighbors shifted uncomfortably, their earlier curiosity curdling into doubt, and Lewis, reading aloud the VIN from Marcus's registration, matched it digit by digit against the number on the windshield while dispatch confirmed ownership in Marcus's name, his voice flattening into certainty as he announced, "Registration matches. Vehicle belongs to Mr. Johnson." A sentence that should have ended the matter but only inflamed Karen further, her face flushing crimson as she shrieked that the system must be wrong, that criminals know how to fake everything, while Briggs, unwilling to admit he had nearly ordered a tow on false pretenses, muttered about further investigation and temporary holds, his authority bruised by the clarity of the facts. But Marcus, breathing slow, counted to 5 the way his late wife taught him, then spoke with the calm steel of a man who refused to be broken in his own driveway, telling Briggs, "Officer, if you put chains on my car today, you'll be stealing from the man whose name is printed on every line of his contract." And Alicia's camera caught every word, the live stream audience surging, the cul-de-sac buzzing, until even the mail carrier, pulling up at her truck, waved casually and said, "Congrats on a new car, Mr. Johnson. Saw you at Tri-County yesterday." An offhand truth so sharp it sliced Karen's story in half, leaving her sputtering as Briggs looked away. Lewis nodded slightly, and Marcus stood taller, silent but unshaken, knowing the battle wasn't yet over, but also knowing the tide had turned, that dignity and proof together had cracked the facade of lies Karen had built, and that the next chapter of this fight would be less about who owned the car and more about whether justice would finally silence the HOA's self-appointed queen. The air in the cul-de-sac hung thick, as though even the summer sun hesitated to shine too brightly on what was unfolding. The neighbors clustered like jurors behind hedges and mailboxes, watching Marcus Johnson stand calm beside the gleaming sedan that bore his name in every official record, while Karen Whitfield, red-faced and trembling, scrambled for another weapon in her arsenal of entitlement, thrusting her pink pre-approval slip toward Officer Briggs again, as if sheer repetition could transform paper fiction into legal fact, shouting that Marcus must have manipulated the system, that he had friends at the DMV who forged everything, her words spilling faster as cracks spread through her authority. And it was then that Alicia, her live stream still rolling, decided to twist the knife of truth by zooming her phone on Karen's flimsy document, reading aloud for every watching stranger online and every silent neighbor within earshot. This says PR approval. No VIN. No name matching this car's registration. This is a loan application, not ownership. The crowd murmured. Dispatch confirmed again over Lewis's radio that the sedan was Marcus's property, and still Karen flailed, turned to the neighbors and shrieking that these criminals always know how to fake documents, her voice cracking as if she could hear the ground giving way beneath her feet. But the true surprise came not from Marcus, not from Alicia, not even from the officers. It came from a community that had silently tolerated her reign. One by one, phones rose from porches and driveways, other neighbors filming now, whispering comments like, "She does this every month," she called on a delivery guy last week. She accused the Garcias of stealing patio chairs. And suddenly Karen wasn't the voice of order but a common denominator of chaos, her reputation unraveling in real time. Officer Lewis, emboldened, squared his shoulders and addressed her firmly. "Ma'am, step back. This car is registered to Mr. Johnson. Your documentation is not evidence of ownership. Continued false reports may constitute misuse of 911. When Karen, in a final desperate play, lunged toward the car and yelled, "It is mine. The key will work for me." Briggs shifted uncomfortably and murmured about procedure. But even he couldn't ignore the weight of the evidence. Karen yanked on regardless, the handle stiff under her grip, and Alicia's camera caught the moment in perfect clarity. The HOA president tugging at a stranger's locked car, like a thief herself, while the rightful owner stood coolly 3 feet away, his dignity unshaken. Marcus calmly pressing the fob in his palm, the doors flashing their silent testimony, and grabbed the handle. The sedan chirped with a lock she hadn't touched. A gasp rippled across the cul-de-sac. The live stream comment exploded, and Officer Lewis stepped forward, voice sharp now. "That's enough." Step away from the vehicle, his authority cutting through chaos, as Briggs finally radioed in a note about possible false reporting. With her fingers still trembling in the air, Karen staggered back, but her words faltered into half-formed justifications. Her powerful certainty vanished from her voice, leaving only the shrill sound of a woman realizing that her lies had not only failed, but had also exposed her as the aggressor, her carefully polished power crumbling under the weight of the truth, evidence, and the watchful eyes of a neighborhood that was no longer willing to believe her stories. Silence finally found the cul-de-sac, not the comfortable kind that lives between birdsong and sprinklers, but the charged quiet that follows a gavel in a courtroom, when Officer Lewis, flanked by Briggs, whose authority had been sanded down to procedure, announced for everyone to hear that the vehicle was registered to Marcus Johnson, that there was no probable cause to detain the owner or impound his car, and that any further claims without evidence would be handled as false reporting. The words fell like cool rain on scorched ground, and for a heartbeat the entire street seemed to exhale, neighbors lowering phones, children peeking from behind porch rails, the mail carrier giving a small, conspiratorial nod as if truth were a letter she had been trying to deliver all morning. Karen Whitfield's mouth opened and closed around a dozen new postures. Indignation, confusion, righteous hurt. But none of them fit anymore, not with Alicia's live stream floating proof across hundreds of screens. And not with the slow, collective turn of the community, recognizing that the loudest voice had also been the least honest. Marcus said nothing. He didn't need to. He picked up his keys from the workbench the way a man picks up a tool he knows well, slipped them into his pocket, and rested one palm lightly on the silver fender as if to steady it, or perhaps to steady himself, then looked at Alicia, whose chin was lifted and eyes were bright in that fierce, young way that refuses to be trained into silence. She lowered the phone and stepped closer, and in the small space between them he felt the strange, exquisite ache that comes when the thing you protected turns around and protects you. "Sir," Officer Lewis said, quieter now, the edge of command softened into respect. "Would you like us to document a complaint?" Marcus considered the word, complaint. How small it sounded pressed against the weight of a morning like this. Then nodded once. "Yes," he said, "not for revenge. For record." He dictated calmly, methodically, the way he described a timing chain. Karen's accusation, the false claim of ownership, the attempt to open his locked car, the misuse of 911. Briggs wrote it down without commentary, pen scratching like a man doing penance, while Karen hovered at the curb, stricken, her clipboard pressed so hard to her chest it left a crease in the cardigan she wore like armor. When he finished, Marcus surprised even himself by turning toward her. "You could have asked," he said, not bitter, just tired. "You could have walked over any other day and said hello. You could have congratulated a neighbor." The words did more to her than the badge or the camera. They revealed the emptiness at the center of her performance, and for a flicker of a second, small as a moth's wing, her expression wavered towards something like shame before stiffening again into practiced indignation of a woman who has rarely been required to apologize. She made a final stand, a last grasp at a throne already toppled. "I was protecting the community," she insisted, voice thready. "We can't have stolen property." Lewis interrupted, no longer patient. "This property isn't stolen, and false alarms don't protect this community." He handed her a card with instructions for responding to a misuse of 911 inquiry and turned away, which is how you tell a story is over when it insists on continuing. The official coda came faster than anyone expected. A clerk from a magistrate's office stamped a hearing date on Marcus's complaint within 48 hours. When the morning arrived, the courtroom's fluorescent lights made everyone the same pale human color, matched by the judge's raised brow and wooden benches. Judge Rios listened for 13 efficient minutes, Alicia's video playing on a small monitor, dispatch logs confirming the match, the pink pre-approval slip held up like Exhibit A in a seminar on what ownership is not, and then delivered a decision with the surgical clarity of a veteran. The complaint sustained in full, a formal reprimand for frivolous and misleading use of emergency services, a civil warning attached to Karen's name, and a recommendation to the HOA board to review its code of conduct policy regarding harassment and biased targeting. She added, eyes sliding to Karen with the gravity of a parent who expects better, that community vigilance is not a license to invent crimes, and that if Whitfield wanted to speak in a meaningful way for her community, she could start by understanding the difference between facts and fear. There was no slow clap, no dramatic fainting, just paperwork and consequence, which is how justice often arrives, on dull paper that changes bright lives. Karen was confronted outside the courthouse by a group of neighbors who had chosen curiosity over denial. Some of them had shared her suspicion last week. Others had been silent, and a few had brought their HOA ballots in their bags because they were brave or tired or both. No one shouted. No one threw rocks. Someone did hand her a clipboard, the board's own, reused, and she signed a resignation that had already been drafted. Power rarely leaves quietly, but this time it did, because there was nothing left for it to feed on. Back on the cul-de-sac, apologies came in shapes Marcus recognized. An elderly neighbor leaving a tin of lemon bars with a note that read simply "I was wrong." The watering man walking across his grass, hat in hand. To say he looked away too often when Karen called the cops on delivery drivers and teens, and anyone who didn't look like a Christmas card. The mail carrier laughing as she snapped a photo of Marcus and Alicia beside the car and saying she'd printed for them with the good. Paper from the back office. And Officer Lewis, off-duty and out of uniform, stopping by with a spare motion sensor light for their driveway, as if to say, I can't undo morning, but I can help with night. Briggs didn't come by. But Alicia noticed a patrol car slow a hair longer than usual at the corner each afternoon, a mechanical blink of caution remapped into care. The HOA board held a special meeting under string lights in the pocket park, where someone had brought folding chairs and someone else had printed a stack of bylaws with the self-importance drained out. They voted to censure the misuse of security as a tool of harassment, and a grandmother with a silver braid suggested something radical. Monthly coffee on the green with the simple agenda of learning each other's names, so that a new car could be greeted with a smile instead of summons. It succeeded. Alicia filmed Karen's former allies signing up for trash pickup with exaggerated joy, not to make fun of them, but to remind herself that even performative change must begin somewhere. The board also issued a written apology to Marcus, which he taped inside the garage, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that paper can harm or heal depending on what we write on it. In the quiet that followed, life returned with small, stubborn rituals. Alicia finished her summer reading on the porch steps. Marcus replaced the garage light with a warm LED that made the silver paint glow like a promise kept. On Saturday mornings, he tuned a neighbor's whining serpentine belt and refused payment, accepting a bag of peaches instead. On Sunday afternoons, he took Alicia for practice drives to nowhere, letting her hands learn the new steering, smiling when she rolled the windows down at red lights because the premium sound made even commercials feel like songs. And sometimes, when the evening came orange and soft, he would sit alone in the driver's seat with the door open, the cool shade smelling like clean leather and the faint ghost of dealership plastic. And he would rest both hands on the wheel and attend to a man who was held on through worse, listening to the click of the cooling engine like a heartbeat settling after a sprint. He didn't gloat. He didn't post a victory screed. When Alicia asked if they should share the judge's order online, he said, "Let the video speak. Let the facts speak for themselves." She nodded, understanding the way only the young and the tested do, and uploaded a final clip with a caption that read, "They tried to take his car with a phone call. The truth rolled out of his own garage." It spread again, not viral like a fire this time, but steady like the way a good story walks from porch to porch, each retelling smoothing its edges until it fits the ear. Weeks later, a small thing happened that felt bigger than the rest. Marcus came home with a paper bag of oil filters and caught sight of Karen standing at the edge of his driveway. No pearls, no clipboard, a folded letter in her hands. He could have turned away. He didn't. She cleared her throat and said, without preamble, "I'm here to apologize." The words were careful, ungainly, as if she was learning a new language by sounding out each syllable. She held out the letter, handwritten, the ink blotting where she pressed too hard. "I can't take back what I did," she said. "I thought—" She stopped, shook her head. "I didn't think. I reacted. I'm sorry." Marcus studied her for a long second. He didn't rush to absolve her, and he didn't weaponize her remorse. "Thank you," he said finally. "The fact that you said it matters." He didn't invite her in. He didn't slam the door. She left, shoulders lighter by an ounce only she could feel. For the first time, Alicia, who had been watching from the porch with her phone in her pocket, asked politely, "You believe her?" Marcus shrugged. "I believe in records," he said, and in trying again. On a late summer evening that tasted like honeysuckle and sounded like neighborhood kids learning skateboard tricks, father and daughter took the sedan up the overlook road that curves above the city. They parked facing west as the skyline turned from glass to ember, and Alicia leaned her head against the seat, saying softly, "Mom would have loved these speakers," which made Marcus laugh, real, deep surprised, because grief had shifted something inside him from anchor to sail. They sat until the sky was more memory than color, and when they drove back down, the headlights threaded the familiar bends like a needle through cloth, stitching the day into the week into the life they were building. As they turned onto their street, the porch lights blinked on in a friendly constellation. The cul-de-sac looked ordinary again, which is to say it looked like a place where extraordinary things, justice, accountability, the stubborn persistence of dignity, had happened quietly and were now part of the furniture. Marcus eased the sedan into the garage, set the parking brake with the exactness of a man who respects machines and moments, and let the engine tick itself calm. He touched the steering wheel once more, not to claim it but to bless it, then climbed out and stood in the doorway with Alicia while the garage door descended smooth as a curtain. "What do you think?" she asked, half-smile already forming. He considered the question in the wide, simple sense, about cars and neighbors and the slow work of earning peace, then answered the only way that felt honest. "I think," he said, "they'll think twice next time." He flipped the wall switch, and the light went out on a story that didn't end with triumph so much as with steadiness. A man, a daughter, a car with paperwork in order, a street learning how to be a community instead of performance. And if there was a final line to be spoken to the audience that would later hear this tale, it would be this. They called the cops on his new beginning. The truth told him to stand down,